fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Why in the heck are there so many Christian denominations? Hey everybody, Joe Simons, Like Diamonds, Salt Strong Unchurched. We are back. This is going to be a good one. This question's come up a couple times, and some of it stemmed from a recent podcast where I talked about being religious versus being spiritual, or just religiousness versus spirituality. And there is some confusion. I think I probably even confused some listeners on that podcast because I think people said, all right, is it bad to be religious? Is it only good to be spiritual? If you missed that one, the overall kind of theme was that, religion is rules, right? But that doesn't mean all rules are bad. We have rules in our society for a reason. And spirituality is more about, relationship with Jesus. But then again, if you're 100% spiritual and have no kind of religion and you're just oneness with the earth, that's also a little bit, meaning normally the answer somewhere, it lies somewhere in the middle. So in a sentence, spirituality is not about rituals, routines, or rites, or any of the things that we think about with religion. It's about a relationship with Jesus. It's about a relationship with God. And, the organized church, and back in the day, meaning the religious leaders and just the organized religion, the Pharisees at the time, that was the tension. I mean, the biggest tension that we read about and get to see about in things like The Chosen, amazing show, by the way, all that tension is between Jesus and his disciples and these religious leaders of the day, and it all revolved around rules. I don't know if you guys know this, but these Pharisees back in the day, at the time of Jesus, they had so many rules. They literally wanted to follow every single thing the Bible said, not just to a T, but to like the next level. And then they make rules about those rules. I'll give you an example. Taking the Lord's name in vain, right? We've all heard of that. We maybe have done it when we stubbed our toe or had something drop on our foot. We all know what that is. I don't have to explain it to you. But these Pharisees, they went so far, because that is a rule, obviously, not to take the Lord's name in vain. They went so far and kept making rules on top of rules. This is no joke, that it all of a sudden became illegal, if you will, or looked down upon, even to use the word God. Like you couldn't even use the word God in prayer because that might be taking the Lord's name in vain. Another example is with women, right? You're not supposed to lust after another woman. It got so far they kept making rules over rules over rules that all of a sudden you couldn't even look a woman in the eyes because that was considered it could lead towards lust, right? And it's crazy, right? So at some point, these rules and these rights, they can go way, way, way too far. And so the back to the church thing, so I want to just throw that out there because I think there was some confusion. The answer lies somewhere in the middle. Yes, you want to be spiritual and also, have a religion and be part of religion. And that brings me to this point. Why church? Do we even need a church? I don't remember Jesus going to an actual church with an altar and all these rituals. And in many ways that you're right. However, Christ followers, and this is all throughout the New Testament, I mean, they're called to serve one another, right? To encourage one another, to accept one another, to forgive one another. This one another thing is a theme throughout the Bible, right? We're called to do all this stuff to one another, but yet you can't really do the one another by yourself, right? Meaning it takes a community to do one another with, regardless of what it is, forgiving, loving, being with, talking about Jesus. So there's clearly a need for the church. And I think the big misconception is that the church has to be some building with a steeple and a cross on top and an altar and pews and all this stuff. That's certainly one way to do church, but I'll give you an example. I did a mission trip in Uganda, and something that certainly changed my life and my whole perspective on it. And this was all a Christian-based mission trip there for 14 days. And we were in quote unquote churches, and you never would have called them in a church to say, we were literally out in the middle of fields, right? These people would worship and pray and and come together and serve one another anywhere. I mean, the place that we stayed the most, which would have basically been considered their church, it was just kind of in the center of a little of their little village, if you will, was just a field with dirt. I mean, it was literally a dirt, and they had a big tent, an open tent, no air conditioner, no fans, just a tent to block the sun from really beating down on you in the hot, crazy hot African weather there. And that's their version of church. It's coming together, celebrating Jesus Christ and talking about him and forgiving one another, serving one another, all the things, encouraging one another, praying over one another, all the things that we're called to do. So yes, I do believe we are called to go to church. The big question is, what is church to you? And that's where it can look and feel a little bit different depending on who you are and how you like to celebrate Jesus and how you like to worship with others and how you like to be around others. I think the best analogy is when someone says, well, hey, why so many denominations? Well, why so much music, right? Let's get real specific. Let's just say we took 100 random people off the street and said, hey, I want you to name the one song that gets you pumped up, that gets you fired up. Like if you were about to do something big, stepping on the plate for a baseball game to try to hit a home run, or if you're, about to do something big, what song would you want? And I guarantee I'd have 100 people. They all say something different because we're all wired different. We all have different taste. And that's really the overall theme on why there are so many different denominations. I do think it's frustrating as a Christian and sometimes confusing. This is just me being, transparent and personal, and even trying to explain it to someone who's new. Like, all right, which one do you pick? I don't know. It's just like, why would you tell someone, hey, you can only listen to country music versus rap or reggae or R&B or just good old fashioned rock and roll, right? Everyone's going to be different. Everyone's going to be moved differently by music and by the way that they're worshiping and hearing the word of God. The same reason there's a lot of pastors and not just one. What if all of a sudden they said, hey, there's only one pastor and that everyone's got to listen to him and everyone's just got to like him or her, regardless of how you feel about that person? That would be pretty tough. And even the original Pilgrims, I mean, we're talking about the Puritans, people who left England over religious issues, right? They couldn't even agree. Like there wasn't even a majority there for these people who all came together. I mean, this is like the most tight-knit family in America, right? I'm talking about not just one family, but as a massive community and unit of people who literally left and risked their lives to come over here to America for a new life. And even they couldn't agree. They all had separate little churches. And all of a sudden, there's a black only church, right? There's people who really wanted to just be all about the rituals. There's people who really wanted all learning and they didn't care about the rituals. And there's people who really wanted to have a lot of music. And there's some people who didn't want any music at all or very little music. Everyone's wired a little bit differently. Now, the biggest kind of split, if you will, is probably, you already know this, is Catholic versus Protestant. And that was obviously a massive split. There have been, a couple different splits along the way in terms of, obviously, you guys know about the Romans and you've probably heard of Rome taking over Jerusalem. And obviously that changed a lot. And then the next biggest one, and probably the biggest divide ever in Christian community, is the Protestants and Catholics. And if you look at the first part of Protestant, the word protest is in there. And that's really what it was. It was a protest against the way the Catholics were worshiping and basically doing church, if you will. And there was enough people where it basically split off and created a movement, right? Just like there was the original movement with Judaism, which was a group who believed the Messiah had come in the person of Jesus, and when Jerusalem did fall to the Romans, that Christian movement kind of dispersed and it took up in different little areas. The main one being Rome, which of course was the capital of the Roman Empire, and over all of these little splits, the one thing that's really been the same and stagnant is, and you've heard this as soon as I say it. I know I grew up in an Episcopalian church, and we even said this, even though we weren't Catholic, but we always said one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic, and apostolic church. You've probably heard of that phrase before. And really, here's kind of what it means. One, meaning that's unified, that we're all kind of agreeing on the same point. So one, holy Catholic and apostolic church. So one is just unified, that we all are together, that we all believe in Jesus. Two is holy church, which means setting apart for God and separate from the world, right? Meaning this is holy. This is set apart for God, not from God, set apart for God and separate from the normal world. Catholic, which means universal, and that the church was to be a worldwide church, and that all included, all believers fell really under this main umbrella. So, the word Catholic was being used of the church long before any kind of like Catholic institution that used that for now its own name. So this is going way, way, way back. And then apostolic means that committed to the teaching handed down by Jesus through the apostles as contained in the New Testament. And then another really big turning point, really, or one of those things that really changed Christianity was the Roman Emperor Constantine converted to become a Christian. And so that changed things big time. And then, of course, there was a split between the Western Latin Church, which ended up becoming the Roman Catholic Church, and the Eastern Greek Church, which became known as the Orthodox Church. But once again, nothing compares to the Protestant Reformation, and that was a massive, massive split. And then you have all these different little splits in between there, some of them big, some of them very, very small. And, there's some churches that you go to and you don't tell much of a difference at all. Maybe a few rituals. But I think the easiest way to describe it is what I said. I mean, it's just like, think of it like music. There's no one right way or wrong way. If our goal is to dance and all 100 of us have different dance songs that really get us in the groove, so be it. Obviously, I'm poking fun at that a little bit, but this is a whole lot bigger than just, dance moves. But if we're all believing in Jesus Christ and in the Bible, and we're all believing that church is important and we're called to do this together, regardless if it's, 6 people in a jail cell, right? Because I mean that happens. A lot of people do find Jesus in jail, and that's considered their little church. They have no other way to do it. Or if it's thousands of people in a mega church, I do believe we're all called to do church. I do believe that we're all wired differently for a good reason. That God gave us all certain gifts and gave us all certain ways that we get inspired and that we feel His presence. For instance, I talked about, for me, just being outside and being in nature and being on the water, that does it for me. Whereas some people, they do want to be in a church. On an altar, and that's where they really feel like they're closest to God. Everyone's different, and I can't say that they're wrong and I'm right, because that's not my call. Just like it's not your call. So I hope that makes some sense. I think the music analogy is great. I think that the meaning that we're all one and holy and Catholic and apostolic. I mean, if we just keep that in mind through all the churches, regardless of the different rituals and rites that we may or may not do, that's great. In a church that we've been going to, I mean, it's very it's heavy with music. It's one of those kind of more rock band musics, and we love that. I personally am not a big fan of the old school, just kind of boring hymns. I grew up with that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Once again, it's just I'm not trying to say any kind of music's bad either, right? But for me, I feel like I get goosebumps and I get so much energy with some of these songs that have been redone with more of a band, and that's just the way I'm wired, and there's nothing wrong or right with that. And so I do encourage you to go to some type of church. Once again, it does not have to be in a building with a steeple and with a pew. That's perfectly fine if you do that. I think that's great if you do it. But I do believe we're all called to go to church. It's very clear that we're called to do this together. And at the same point, your church might look different for someone else's. So I would call you to not be judgmental and to not be a hypocrite and to not be all the things that turns people off about Christians just because someone's worshiping different than you. And I do think that is probably one of the bigger problems with denominations. And I've been around people, who are, let's just say, Catholic, and they're making fun of the Baptists and vice versa. The Episcopalians, make fun of Lutherans or whatever it is. There's always, some little, side joke. And I do think we're all called to worship together and not poke fun of one another. So if you have any questions on this or insights, this is just my quick opinion because I did get quite a few questions from that last podcast I did about religious versus spirituality, and just kind of felt called to share this one today. Hope you got something out of it, maybe even learn a little bit of history about the church and all these denominations. And if you have a great analogy or things that you've learned or that your pastors taught you or that you've gained in knowledge throughout the years, or any things that I have that's completely wrong, which is very possible, let me know. Joe@saltstrong.com, JOE@saltstrong.com. Otherwise, get to church, get a group. Even just having a group that can pray over you. Things will happen in life. I remember when I found out at 28 years old that I had melanoma, like real deal skin cancer. This is not like benign, hey, this could turn into skin cancer. This was it. This is the stuff that kills you, is what was in my body. And I was scared to death at the time. I was not going to church. And that at that moment, more than anything, I didn't want money. I didn't want all the things, a new car, a new house. I didn't want all the things that we might think about on a day-to-day basis in terms of the material things. All I wanted at that moment in time, I still remember it like it was yesterday, was people to pray over me. That's all. Isn't that interesting that when we do hit a rock bottom moment or something scary like cancer, all the other stuff about how we look, right, and all the things that we might worry about on a day-to-day basis, it all went away. And the thing I wanted more than anything at that moment was a group of people, a church, if you will. I wanted my old church group back to be able to tell them what I'm going through and to pray over me. So I'll just leave it at that. So I do think that's when it's more important than ever is when you're on tough times. And that will happen regardless of who you are, whatever your wealth is and your status, no matter what, you will go through tough times. Either if it's not yourself, it'll be a spouse, it'll be a kid, it'll be losing a family member. We all have to go through things like that. And that's when it's so important to have a church group or even just a group of Christians that will pray over you and constantly have you in prayer to get through a tough time, or even just to be there for you and to give you hope and just to pray over healing. So I'll leave it at that. I do believe that's why it is critical to have a group, whether you're meeting in a jail cell or whether you're meeting out in a field or even just out in the boat. And regardless of how many people it is, having a group like that is what it's all about. We're called to do this together. Appreciate you guys. Love you. And I'll talk to you on the next episode.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. To find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. For he's the reason why we are this way. And he put fishing in our soul.